Good morning. As we welcome attendees to this session, we just
Estamos
opened the room.
bienvenidos. Vamos a esperar unos minutos. Para acceder a la interpretación a través de su computadora, por favor, va a tener un casillero donde usted va a poder escoger la opción en español y luego de allí yo voy a poder estar conmigo. Esta presentación va a ser hecha simultáneamente en español.
Myrna, I don't see the translation button on here. Do you have it on yours?
Yeah, this is Never Navarro. I don't see it either, so wondering if
I can see it. Would you like me to go ahead and start it?
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all those folks that are joining us. We're just
muchas
allowing
gracias a todas las preguntas que nos están llenando, las personas que están entrando. Can you hear me still, or
I can still hear you.
I click Spanish. Yeah, and usually it's like a little box, but I don't see it. I just see it as it's a different way. So if you can hear me, maybe it's not done properly. Can you try a different way, please? Because you shouldn't be able to hear me if once I click the little Spanish box.
Let's see.
Hello, everyone. Tamika, Holly's going to come in and fix the interpreter issue really quick, okay?
Thank you.
Hi, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I apologize. I'm jumping in and out, so.
Okay. Un momento, van a reparar el canal de interpretación en español. Por favor, esperen unos momentos. Muchas gracias por su paciencia. Thank you. Gracias. I just let Spanish speaking people. We're gonna fix the issue in a second.
Thank you for your patience. We're having some technical issues with the interpretation, but we will be getting started here very shortly. Thank you. Thank you for your support and thank you for your patience.
Muchas gracias por su paciencia y por su apoyo. Estamos teniendo un problema de interpretación técnico, así que lo vamos a solucionar y vamos a empezar la junta muy pronto. Muchas gracias.
Good morning to everyone. As we work on the interpretation feature to make sure everybody has access, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and get to know each other. We'll get started in a few moments.
Nuevamente, buenos días. Mientras esperamos reparar el problema técnico de interpretación, si ustedes podrían presentarse, poner su nombre y, en el chat para así poder conocerles, sería bueno. Muchas gracias.
Thank you all for your patience. It'll be just another moment. We really appreciate you guys joining us for this session. We're just working on the interpretation feature, and once we get that fixed, we will get started. Thank you.
Tamika, can you give Holly access as a host, please?
Yeah, that's already been done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nuevamente, muchas gracias por su paciencia mientras mejoramos y reparamos el problema tecnológico en el canal de interpretación. Así que gracias por su apoyo y por su paciencia.
While we're waiting for the interpretation to be fixed, feel free to use the chat. I see some wonderful participants putting their information in the chat. We definitely appreciate your patience, and we should be able to get started very shortly. Thank you.
Mientras esperamos, si pudieran
Thank you all for your patience. Can you guys hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you guys for your patience. You know, we want to definitely thank you for joining us for the Family Voices of California 2023 Health Summit. We got our interpretation feature set up. And so if anyone would like to access that channel, we will be putting that information in the chat so that you can access that feature. We definitely thank you for your patience, as well as our translators, you know, for helping us to make this session more accessible for participants. As a recommendation, I would recommend that at the bottom of your screen, there is a little world button, a little globe. If you are listening to the session in English, you can still click that interpretation button. You can click that globe and you will access the English channel for this session. My name is Tamika Foots-Rochelle. I am a consultant with Family Voices of California, and I am also a parent. I have the honor of being your moderator for today's session. For your convenience, there are captions available for you at the bottom of your screen. All you have to do is click that button at the bottom that has the two initials CC, and you will be able to turn on or off the captions as you see fit. For this session, we will also be using the Q&A section to submit questions for our presenters. So feel free to ask any questions that you may have of our panelists in this area, and that will also make sure that we don't miss any questions from you and those that are participating in this session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and welcome you to partnering with your Regional Center Service Coordinator to meet your child's needs. As we just heard in the keynote and plenary sessions, you know, collaboration and partnering, they're the keys to support our loved ones in receiving the services and supports that they deserve as we navigate systems. To support you on this journey, I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing some amazing speakers as we learn strategies on how to partner with our Regional Center Service Coordinator and support our children. So we will hear from all of the speakers to ensure that you guys get all of this wonderful, great information that they plan to share. And then what we'll do is we'll transition this conversation over into the Q&A for our panelists to make sure that we answer all of your questions before we transition over to the final session for the day. So our first speaker is Amy Westling with the Association of Regional Centers Agencies, or ARCA. Amy's going to be providing us with an information overview of how regional centers can support our families. So thank you, Amy, and welcome.
Thank you so much. And so I'm going to share my slides. Let's see. Okay, can folks let me know if they're seeing the correct slide? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yes, we can
Yep.
see.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you so much for having me here today and inviting me to spend just a few minutes talking about how regional centers support families and how we can all do this critical work on behalf of you and your children together. Okay, so we're going to spend a little bit of time today just talking about the quick history of regional centers and what's in the Lanterman Act and how we can all work together. So it's really critical to understand that regional centers were the product of time that and energy that families put into seeking a different alternative for their children. In the late 1960s, there were about 13,500 individuals living in our state's developmental centers, and there was a waiting list to get children in. And so families from San Francisco and Los Angeles got together and really bombarded the state capitol, begging for an answer and a different solution. Assemblymember Frank Lanterman helped them to expand a model that was originally piloted in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so in 1969, there was the promise to expand the regional center system, which was intended to provide families with the support they need in order to maintain their children in their family homes and in the community. There was the commitment made to expand that statewide. So the Lanterman Act today is, and of course it's named for Assemblymember Lanterman, is really our foundational principles. And it contains lots of information about how regional centers work. The original text of the Lanterman Act was only about 10 or 15 pages, and it contained a lot of the critical pieces that we still rely on today. Now the text is about 400 pages and it has a lot more details, but still those foundational principles are included, including the concept that regional centers were set up to have local control through their independent boards of directors, which allows the community to have some input into how services are delivered, but with state oversight because it is state and federal dollars that pay for the services. Regional centers were intended to fill in gaps in other services. So there was always the belief that you should and could access services from other places first, and your regional center would really help you navigate those things and fill in gaps where they existed. Really progressive for the time was the belief that individual people and families need unique services, and that over the lifespan of the individual, the array of services and supports they would need would change. So it wasn't one size fits all, and it wasn't a limited list of things. It was more about what services and supports do you need as a result of having an individual with a developmental disability in your family, or being an individual with a developmental disability. And then really importantly, California has the only entitlement to services of this type. In other states, there are sometimes waiting lists of 20 years to access these types of services. So we're really pleased that California has been able to maintain its commitment to this system and the people it supports for as long as we have. So very quickly, what services are available? Service coordination is a service provided to all people served by regional centers. Everybody is paired with a service coordinator. In our Early Start program, which is for our birth through children up to their 3rd birthday, that program has a prescribed list of services that are available, in part because it is technically a special education program. Whoops, sorry. And once you are age 3 and above, you qualify for what we call our Lanterman services. And there are a variety of services available. Family supports, things like respite, personal assistance, daycare, those kinds of things. Various therapies that are needed and go beyond perhaps what the individual may need to access the school system. Residential support, and that can look like licensed group living, support in the family home, support for the individual to be in their own home, daytime activities, as well as supports around employment and work, and a variety of other services. So over the last 50 years, we've come to believe and understand that people have the ability and the capacity, and we should support them to achieve all kinds of things that 50 years ago we just didn't think about. So living in a place of one's own and working and being an integral part of the community is much of what we're looking for today. So how to work with your service coordinator. Number one, never forget that you are the expert in your own life and your family's own life. Number two, assume partnership. So people who work in this field are some of the most amazing people I have ever encountered in my entire life. And they are here because they want to help. So help them to help you. And a big piece of that is open communication. So always feel free to reach out to your service coordinator and to keep that line of communication open. The next item is to identify needs that your family has. Don't assume that your service coordinator is going to know those things. So identify what are those things related to your family that you need help with. Next, ask questions. Our system isn't always very intuitive, and it can be confusing, and it can seem like a lot. We know that a lot of professionals come into people's lives when they themselves have a disability or they have a family member with a disability. So feel free to ask questions. Find out about how it works and what the process is, and don't hesitate to ask if there's something you need and feel like you don't quite know the answer to. And then if possible, get involved. As I said, regional centers are governed by a local board of directors. So if you can get involved at that level, great. There are other opportunities to get involved as well, various work groups and committees and opportunities for you to be part of shaping what happens in your local community. And so those are just some ways that you can work with your regional center to improve the life of your family, but also to help shape what the services look like for those in your community elsewhere. So thank you.
And thank you, Amy, for that wonderful presentation. You really set the foundation, not only about regional centers and the Lanterman Act, but most importantly, how we can work in partnership with regional center for our loved ones. And so with that, what we're going to do is we're going to transition over to Christopher Wecks, who is also a parent advocate and independent facilitator, to learn about some alternative options to traditional services. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Tamika. And hi, everyone. Really glad to be here. Yeah, my name's Chris Wecks. I am a parent of a regional center client. I'm also a what they call an independent facilitator, which is kind of an unfortunate word that has been adopted in but in bureaucratese. But basically, it means that I am someone that helps people who are moving through and are inside of a new program that the Department of Developmental Services has initiated. And is available to all regional center clients, called the Self-Determination Program. So I will share my screen. Now, I am here to talk about two things today. One is this new program, the Self-Determination Program. And the other thing is a little bit about, I was asked to give a few words about IPP advocacy. So I'm going to do the latter first, and doing the latter well will help anyone who is interested in the self-determination program. So talking a little bit about IPP advocacy, and an IPP is the only acronym I promise I will put in this slideshow today. I know Family Voices of California is very anti-acronym, and I share that sentiment heartily. And IPP I will explain in just a moment. And then I will also share a few tips and tricks, strategies for success for IPP. And then after that, I will talk about the self-determination program, what it is, how to get into it in 5 somewhat simple steps, and then what it is an independent facilitator can do to support you if you want that. So IPP advocacy, an IPP, an individual program plan. So an IPP is a document that you should be creating with your regional center, your service coordinator or your case manager, that talks about your goals for your future, your educational goals, your goals to find an independent place to live, your goals to join a club or do an activity that you really love, your goals about making friends or falling in love. The goals in your life, the authentic you goals, should be in an IPP document. Also in an IPP document should be your needs. What challenges do you have getting to those goals? What's in the way? What are the obstacles? So those needs should be in an IPP. And then thirdly, an IPP should have the supports from all sources in your life, I'm emphasizing there, that will meet your needs and be able to get you to your goals. So if you have a good IPP, if you help drive that process, you will win. Most problems that people end up having with regional centers and the supports and services that they think they ought to be getting but aren't, or other issues that arise, they generally arise because one of those 3 things is incorrect. The regional centers are required to provide a set of supports and services, barring they're not provided by other generic service providers, but those supports and services have to be spelled out on your IPP. So starting there is a really great way to be able to drive a process that gets you what you need in your life or your loved one's life. So you can always call for an IPP meeting with your regional center, and I encourage you to do so if you feel like your or your loved one's IPP is not what you think it should be. Okay, so you call an IPP meeting. What are some strategies for success in advocating with a regional center? As Amy mentioned, it can be a somewhat opaque process. We don't know what regional centers can do or can't do for us. We're a little confused about the process sometimes. As a parent, I know that when my daughter first started receiving regional center services, I did not know what this organization did, what these regional centers accomplished, what were the boundaries. I know what special education did. I knew what medical insurance did, but regional centers, kind of misty. Well, regional centers can do, as Amy had noted, just about anything to help support you in your life that isn't already supported by some other agency. So when thinking about regional center strategies for success, one of the first things I would encourage you to do is to write down or think about what in your life is not going the way that you would want it to. Your loved one's life is not being supported in the way that you need it. I often encourage my clients to think about their life and divide it into slices of pie. So in your home, in your occupation, which means school or work or day programs, other activities, and then in your community and who you associate with. What are the issues? What are the challenges? What supports are not being met right now? The second thing I'd encourage you to do in a brief presentation like this is just to remember to follow the money, which means that someone probably does need to help support you in the issue that you're thinking about right now. But who supports you is often a tricky question unless you start thinking about regional centers, as Amy noted, as the payer of last resort. There are many agencies that are known as generic resources. generic pay-fors. These are agencies which pay for supports in your life. So medical insurance is a very simple to understand generic resource. Special education and you or your loved one's IEP. These identify supports and services that your school district needs to pay for. In-home support services, otherwise known as IHSS. This is a generic service, generic resource. These various generic resources must come into play when you're identifying what support or service you need. So if you identify that you need in-home support, a regional center will naturally ask if you have exercised your right to use IHSS or in-home support services. Only after these generic resources are exhausted do regional centers come into play. But then at that point, you have every right and entitlement to ask for that kind of support that you need. Third strategy is just to know your rights. The right to case management, to call for an IPP, to voice your goals and your problems and your needs. And almost all of the challenges that I encounter on behalf of my daughter and on behalf of my clients are solved at this level. 99% at least of the challenges that I encounter are solved by simply communicating well and calling for an IPP or communicating with your service coordinator or your case manager. And then it's important to know, and I encourage you to research your legal recourse. So you do have rights, and if you are denied for a support that you think you justifiably deserve, you should know what rights you have to appeal and dispute that. And so I encourage you to research mediation and fair hearing as options that you may need to use at some point. Okay, so with that in mind, what is the self-determination program? Well, if you've done a great job advocating for yourself, and you look around and you find, well, the range of vendor supports and services that your regional center can offer seems rather spare or rather generic, the self-determination program might be for you. In short, the self-determination program is a new program instituted across the state of California for all regional center clients that allows you to have more freedom, more autonomy, more responsibility over the sorts of supports and services in your life. Gone are the requirements to use a vendored service provider. Martha has listed the initiative and the link to the Department of Developmental Services. So I encourage you to look at that website. And if this is a brand new topic for you, one of the ways to think about this is all of the services and supports that you or your loved one would have received from the regional center gets, in a sense, kind of liquidated. And you are provided with a financial sum that you can then turn around and identify supports and services that are more unique, more tailored to your needs in your life to help support you in your community or your loved one in your community or in your home. Or and so one big change about the self-determination program is you do control the purse of it. You get to identify who you want in your life, what supports you want in your life, and how much you're going to pay for those supports. You're also responsible for the finances around that. You can run out of money. It's a program which truly gives you the freedom to choose what supports in your life that you want, as opposed to the traditional services, which offers a wide range, but often perhaps a rather generic and narrow band of support types. It's a very exciting program. I'm a big fan. It can be a little bit difficult to get into. So I'll briefly just note 5 steps to help you get started thinking about getting into self-determination if this is something that interests you. Your first step would be to attend an orientation, and it would be a good primer to get to know a little bit more about the program than what 5 minutes here can offer. But your regional center or the Department of Developmental Services has partnered with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities to provide an orientation that you can attend. So that is a mandatory first step. And then after that, I encourage everyone to create what's called a person-centered plan, which is just a document that articulates who you or your loved one is, what their best future looks like, what their goals are, and what supports they want and need to get there. And this document will help inform the IPP. And so in that way, it serves as an advocacy tool as well. The third step will be that you and the regional center will create a budget based on the services and supports that your regional center client receives. And that budget, you will turn around and work with what's called an FMS, second acronym, look at that, financial management service. An FMS is a financial management service, which is the entity that'll help you pay bills on your behalf to the people and the companies that you articulate on the spending plan, step 5, that you want to use. And the spending plan is just exactly where that certified budget money goes. So these are the basic steps for getting into self-determination. Now, if this feels like a complex process, there are entities that can help. Like I said, what I am is an independent facilitator. So you can identify if there's an independent facilitator that you'd like to work with. You can also become an independent facilitator if this topic really interests you. But facilitators can serve as advocates and service connectors. I often work with clients in finding those unique supports, the proverbial underwater basket weaving that we've all been hunting for, that you just haven't been able to find somewhere else. I also do a great deal of advocacy work with regional centers. My background is as a public services advocate, so special education advocacy, IHSS advocacy. And so a lot of the work I do as well is go through the generic resources that a participant is receiving or perhaps should be receiving and working that into the overall plan that someone has for their future going forward. And then just troubleshooting and issues that arise inside of self-determination and prior to it. So independent facilitators is a resource that can help you with that. It's an optional resource, like everything inside of self-determination. The power is in your hands to manage as much or as little of the process that you feel comfortable with and to get as much support as you need in order to accomplish it. So that's a little bit about the self-determination program. It's very difficult to synopsize all of this in 5 minutes or what's really more like 10 minutes, but I'm glad to answer questions to anybody, now or in the future about this program. So thank you, Tamika, back to you.
Oh, thank you, Chris. And actually, I am going to go ahead and ask you one of the questions that was in Q&A now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What is the time frame for completing all 5 steps for?
Yeah, I think a realistic time frame at this point in time is between 3 and 6 months for entering the self-determination program. There are the financial management service, the regional center that you're working with. All of these are and actually finding the unique service and support providers that you want in your life. So a 3 to 6 month time frame at this point in history is about correct. The program has historically had challenges with getting people in even under those timeframes, but I think as a system and at least with my clients, we're getting quite a bit better at speeding those process steps up.
Thank you, Chris. And we do have a few other questions, but what I'm going to do for the sake of time, because we do want to make sure that you guys get to hear all the presentations. So if you have posted a question in Q&A, we will get to that. But what we're going to do is go ahead and let our other presenters present, and then I will go back and I will go over your questions for the group, if that's okay. So with that, thank you, Chris. My hand of applause. I really appreciate your presentation. The same with Amy. Our next presenter is Leinani Walter, and you are going to be speaking on behalf of Department of Developmental Services. So with that, we're going to go ahead and transition over to Leinani. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I think Myrna was going to be sharing screen for my presentation. Wonderful, thank you. Great. So thank you for inviting me today. My name is Leinani Walter. I'm the Chief Equity Officer here at the California Department of Developmental Services. And today I'm going to share a little bit about our community-based efforts in advancing service access and equity in California, and all of the work that's being done with community-based organizations and regional centers and all of the parent and family advocates. So I'm so happy to be here today. I wanted to just make a note that Elena's powerful remarks resonated with me when she said using your voice and being persistent. It's so important in the work that we're doing to listen to and connect with the communities that need the services. And I think that at the heart of all the work that we're doing at the department, it's there. It's with the community. So I'm going to share a little bit more about those pieces and hopefully be able to answer some questions. Next slide, please. This is basically a brief little outline of where we lie. I think the question was, what's the Department of Developmental Services? We're under the umbrella of California Health and Human Services Agency, and we contract with the 21 regional centers who in turn contract with service providers to serve families in the community. So it's a quick map. It gives you kind of a sense of where we are in the big picture. Next slide, please. Regional centers, as Amy said, noting what regional centers do, this gives you a map of kind of the whole state and the coverage of each of the regional centers. Some have a really large geographic area, some have much smaller but higher population. Regional centers, as Amy noted, they conduct assessments and eligibility, and they assist with, of course, planning and facilitating. There's a number of services that regional centers assist with, and I think Amy touched on a number of those things, but the one thing that I like to kind of highlight is purchase of service, and I think that was one of the questions. A purchase of service is where regional centers are actually utilizing the dollars and funding for a particular service, and that's paid for by the regional center. So I think sometimes people want to know exactly what a purchase of service is. That is technically what it is, and I know that Chris noted that there's a lot of generic resources that are out there, and that is a requirement that regional centers are looking to generic resources first. So just giving a kind of a little bit of an overview of what regional centers are. Next slide, please. We are a diverse system. More than half of our consumers are from communities of color, and there's lots of detail here about the numbers of individuals that we serve. The majority of our younger individuals are from the Hispanic community. 67% of all Hispanic consumers are under the age of 22. It gives you an idea of the amount of individuals that are coming from constantly changing the dynamics. What we were when the Lanterman Act was passed many, many years ago. My brother is a person that served in the regional center system. I always say I began learning about this system from him. I began learning about how my mom struggled to figure out what the best service needs were for him. It wasn't just regional centers, right? It was everything. It was all the other services that we needed to connect to make sure that his life was supported in the way that he needed. So we constantly continue to look as he ages, he's in his 40s, we look to other supports that he needs in terms of healthcare and things like that. So there are constantly changing needs of our system. I think one of the areas that we were asked with, I think I was asked to talk about a bit is with such a diverse system, you know, what do we do? How do we address the needs of such a diverse community? We have to have a multifaceted approach. It cannot simply just be one program, one particular service, one particular activity, one particular connection with the community. It's all of them. Addressing areas of inequities in our system requires a multitude of things. And today I was just hoping to talk and highlight a few of those. Next slide, please. So of course, we always begin with our vision, but really what I wanted to point out is that our vision is something that we have worked with Georgetown Center on cultural competence, but we've also worked with families and our stakeholder groups and our DS task force. The big key is that equity is the lens by which we see everything. It's something that I've said multiple times. It's the way we look at how we need to serve people. We cannot look in the same approach that we did last year. We have to build upon the things that are working and listen and connect with our communities to do so. Next slide, please. And this is where it begins. Meaningful community connections. Building a more equitable system. I would say in the last 3 years since I've been here at the department, we've had the opportunity and the privilege of developing focus groups, not just, our larger DS task force, but really focus in on smaller groups, such as the African American focus group, where we've met with African American parents, leaders, service providers, so that we can hear directly from them, talk directly with a community of leaders about what is needed. Those are focused conversations. They're not always easy, but they are meaningful. And I think when I talk about community connections, it's not just the surveys, it's not just the reach out, the outreach, but actually coming together and having an authentic connection. It's building trust and it's focusing on specific communities. Sometimes it's focusing on the broader community. These are, to me, the most and the heart of what we're trying to do to reach diverse communities. Next slide, please. One of the strategies that we're using is the Service Access and Equity Grant Program. It's an amazing program that has CBOs from all parts of California working. The majority are community-based organizations with some funding for regional centers to do specific projects. But the focus of this program is to not solve everything, but to have some opportunities to target efforts and to be the seeds of change. It's not going to be everything. It's not going to solve everything. And I know that that's where many of us want to look. We want to look to this one grant program to carry the weight of an entire system. And what I say is that this grant program has had a number of successes that we have strategized that have actually become policy. And it's one thing that learning from these projects is also an opportunity for us to learn more about what we need and put those needs into practice, into policy. Next slide, please. Language Access and Cultural Competency Program. This is a new program this year. Language access is an essential step in improving access. Without it, simply people will not have the opportunity to learn, understand, and have access to information that is critical to their family. It also raises awareness and understanding because a component of this is culture, not just language access. So some of the plans that are all posted in all 21 regional centers that have been developed focus on areas such as targeted community efforts in the African American community, developing relationships with populations that we have not had. San Diego Regional Center is focused on the unhoused community and partnering with faith-based organizations. North Bay Regional Center is developing not just resources and videos, but working with someone in Spanish to develop a telenovela style video production on resources. Having the opportunity to do things unique that could help in a particular community is really something that we are hoping becomes a benefit across the state. Hosting listening sessions, having the opportunity to foster partnerships with the community, I think is at the heart of this program. The 6-month review, the semi-annual review, the full year review will be in April of this year, and we'll have more information to be shared. So I'm really looking forward to what regional centers are doing on this front with this additional funding from the legislature. Next slide. And I'll go through this quick because I know we're running out of time for me, but tribal outreach is one of our brightest lights this year, having the opportunity to partner with California Tribal Families Coalition and launch a number of initiatives reaching the 109 federally recognized tribes, but specifically developing a tribal engagement guide, working with tribal leaders on what's needed for their community, having over 36 tribal listening sessions, inviting regional centers to be part of those listening sessions. This has been a meaningful opportunity that we just never had before. So I'm happy for this ongoing effort and the lead regional centers that are partnering with CTFC. So we are looking forward to the 2nd annual American Indian Disability Symposium this year, and more news will come from that. So stay tuned. And next slide, please. Community navigation is another strategy that came from and was born from the grant program. The Family Resource Centers Network is our contractor for this work, and they are working statewide in all 21 regional centers with navigators, specifically to help families individually with language, with culture, ethnicity, with those shared pieces. Our navigators are having the opportunity to work with families. So far, over 1,200 families have been served. We look forward as this program gets its feet about them and has more opportunity to connect and do the outreach and information to share with families. I think there will be some really exciting information to report on the Navigator program. And next slide, and I think this is close to our last, implicit bias training. We have a new contract and we're really excited. The RFP resulted in a statewide contract for Equitify. And I encourage you to look up and see the work that Equitify has done. But this training is another strategy trying to implement for regional center staff and contractors involved with eligibility and intake to get the training that's needed. It's the first door that people come into our system. And how people are treated and how they feel about the experience. So while there are authorized services and purchase of service, there's also the way people feel about their experience. So I want to make sure that we always identify a number of different ways that we can approach how to reduce inequities in our system, and implicit bias training hopefully will be another tool in our toolbox. Next slide. And then this is a list. It's hard to get every comprehensive list, but these are some things that are being done that are affecting and hopefully impacting diverse communities in a positive way. There's a number of things listed here: provisional eligibility, social rec and camp, enhanced caseload, bilingual pay differentials. This is a really important initiative. Sometimes it's not as sexy and people maybe don't think about it, but the thing that we hear most from so many of our CBOs is that we want to have service providers, direct service professionals that speak our language, that come into our home with our loved ones, that can communicate with us. So that's an area. Appeals reform to make it easier and more accessible. These are the things that are other strategies that we're trying to implement. And next slide, please. And then just the keys for me to advancing equity here at the department is having a commitment to achieving equity in all things that we do. Prioritizing authentic community engagement, as I've said, has been at the heart, and also being creative, flexible, and make sure to listen. That's the key piece for me. I continue to listen from, every family member, every person I meet helps me to understand more about what we need, and I continue to learn. So next slide is our final slide, and I thank you. And there's my contact information. Thanks so much, Tamika.
Thank you, Leinani, and I just really appreciate all of that information. And then also Martha, you put quite a few links into the chat, which are very helpful as well. So I would encourage anyone to just to visit those websites. It's very helpful. I can also speak from personal experience participating in the Indian Child Welfare Act and DDS webinar that took place. I want to say I keep losing track of months, last year, right around the holidays with ICWA. And it was just very impactful to me personally. So just wanted to say that. But with that, perfect segue to go ahead and speak with Vivian Haun with Disability Rights of California. So with Vivian, I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for having me here today. My name is Vivian Haun. I am a senior attorney at Disability Rights California, where I am part of their intellectual and developmental disabilities practice group. And what that means is that we focus on the needs primarily of people who are served by the regional center system. I am also a sibling like Leinani. I have a brother who is she's 37, 38 now, and he's been served by the regional center system for most of his life. So we have that connection in common. And I know Chris spoke earlier about the self-determination program. My brother is in self-determination and has been for a few years. Those are all just some of the connections that I wanted to point out. thank you to all of the previous speakers and their really good information and insight. Today's topic is about how to partner with your regional center. So I thought I would just share a few points. I don't have any slides, but when people call Disability Rights California, we have multiple ways for people to call us. And often they're calling us because they're frustrated, they run into a barrier or a challenge, and they're looking for some advocacy or some help to get what they need. And so based on the many calls that we get, I thought it might be helpful to share some tips, some of the common themes that we hear from people who call in. One of the things that I think is the most helpful is something that builds on what Chris was saying earlier, which is to really identify what it is that you need. And it's okay if you're like, what do you mean? What do I need? Like, it can be hard, right, to think through that, but that's okay. And I'll explain what I mean. Oftentimes we have people call in who say things like, I wanted X number of hours of respite, or I asked for Y hours of personal assistance, a particular service, and I haven't been able to get it, or my service coordinator suggested something else. And then when we spend time with them and we talk through it with them, what we realize is that it might be that respite or personal assistance, the thing that you came in asking for, actually might not be the best way of addressing what the person actually needs in their life. Or it might be one way, but it might not be the only way. There might be other types of supports or services that might actually serve just as well, or might be better. But if you come in just asking for, you know, a particular service type or particular support without really getting to the bottom first of, like Chris was saying, what is it in your life that is not working currently? If something is stressful or more difficult than it should be, what is it that you need? What do you want to be different for yourself or for your loved one? And what could that support look like? Start there. And so I would come in and very clearly, instead of starting out by asking for a service or a support, start talking about what's in your life, right? Like the thing that's not working and the type of support that you need. Like, what do you want to be different? And make sure that that's what you discuss with your service coordinator, that's what's in your IPP. And from there, that can open up a lot more possibilities in terms of thinking, well, what are some different ways or different strategies we have? What are some different programs or supports that can help you address that thing that has been missing, and that can make things different for you? I would really start there, because hopefully your service coordinator, your independent facilitator, or whomever can then help you get creative and in problem solving, can help you identify a wider range of different options instead of just getting stuck on maybe one particular type of support, which you might be asking for because that's what you've heard you're supposed to ask for, or you know someone else or another family and that's what they have. So it seems like that's what you should be asking for too. Your service coordinator and regional center and other staff can help you figure out the specifics. Start by just sharing your story and being more specific about what you need to be different. So that's what I would suggest. Along the same lines, don't be afraid to be creative and open-minded. Think beyond the, I would say, typical or common services or programs that might be offered to you first, or might be discussed with you first, or that even you might have heard from other people or other parents. Just because something is typical or often provided does not always mean that that is necessarily what will work best for you. And that's okay. I think, as Chris was saying earlier, I think this is easy to say, but sometimes it's hard to know whether those alternative or more creative options are even possible. Like, is that even feasible? these other things, it seems like that's just it, right? Like those are the only things that we have to work with. Oftentimes that's not the case. There's so many other things out there in the system that you may have never heard about, may have never realized were even possible. And I think as a system, we, Disability Rights California, regional centers, everyone in the system, I think really could and should be doing a better job at that kind of outreach and explaining to people what the possibilities are, because it's hard to ask for what you've never seen. Right? But don't be afraid to push a little bit and say, oh, are there other ways of, thinking about this? Are there other types of approaches or programs that might work? And yeah, that would be my next suggestion. One of the other things that Leinani mentioned, and I give DDS a lot of credit for the many really good initiatives that they have undertaken to reach out to more diverse communities and to build the capacity of the system to be more linguistically competent and sensitive. I think that is just tremendous work. One of the other initiatives that she mentioned was fair hearing reform and efforts to try to make that system easier to access and simpler. And that's something that Disability Rights California and some other advocacy groups were very involved with last year and partnering with the department on making some of those changes. So what I might suggest is for you to take advantage of some of these reforms if and when you do find yourself getting stuck with your regional center, right? Because the topic or focus of today is how to partner. Sometimes it will happen, right? Chris and Leinani and Amy know this too. Sometimes it will happen where it feels like you've gotten stuck, where you just can't reach agreement with your IPP team, with your service coordinator. It feels like maybe you're not on the same page. What can you do? The fair hearing reforms that were passed into law last year did a lot of different things to try to make that process easier. I think one of the most important things that it changed that we haven't talked about very much is that it promoted the use of mediation. It is going to make, or it's intended to make, mediation a lot easier to access and hopefully a lot more commonly used. I would really encourage you to reach out and try mediation if for some reason you are not able to reach some kind of agreement. Of course, you can still go to fair hearing. That is always an option, and regional centers will tell you that. But it's like a little trial, right? It can be a lot. It can be stressful. It can be draining, and it can feel very adversarial. One of the things that we really wanted to do with fair hearing reform in collaboration with DDS was to try to encourage both sides to just come to the table and sit down with a mediator, right? A third party can come in and just help everyone think more creatively, think outside the box, and try to find different solutions. So I would really encourage you to take advantage of that and ask about it if that's where you find yourself in the future. Like Chris said earlier, oftentimes challenges or disagreements can be worked out at the IPP level. And for me, it feels like mediation is just maybe a step beyond that, where it's kind of like that, but with someone else, right? Like a third party stepping in to help everyone figure it out if you're having a little difficulty doing so. There's just so much more that I could potentially say. I will just leave then with one more suggestion. I really appreciated what Amy said earlier about people being the experts on their own lives, being the experts on what they want, what they need, what their preferences are, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So as much as possible, I would recommend working on and finding ways to build your voice and build your ability to identify those things, what you like, what you don't like, what you want, what you don't want, what's okay and what's not okay. and to not just look to a parent or a service provider to speak for you or to speak for your loved one. I say this now as an adult sibling, as my parents are getting older and facing health challenges of their own. And we're starting to think about, who will be responsible for my brother moving forward, who will be part of his circle. And I think my parents, like Betty, have been traditionally very involved, right? Very protective, very loving with my brother. But we're finding that my brother has gotten so used to just looking to my mom. What should I do? What am I supposed to do? What's right? And looking back, I wish we had been able to do more earlier in his life to help my brother build self-determination, not the program, but just self-advocacy, the ability to his skills and his muscle to identify what he really needs and to say, no, that's not okay. And I don't want that, if that's something that that he wants to express. So those are the things that I think help us figure out what someone really wants, but also helps to keep them safe. And it's something that we have seen at Disability Rights California in terms of really helping us to understand the kinds of options that might work for that person. So I will just leave you with that, those thoughts about voice and self-determination and advocacy. And again, I appreciate being here today, and I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. That was so powerful and such a perfect segue for our last speaker, Alex Madrid. And I also saw somebody put in the Q&A, and I'm just going to read their last statement. It says, just treating everyone with respect. And your whole presentation to me showed the power of inclusion, making sure that everyone that, what works for you might not work for Chris, might not work for someone else, but just that personalized experience and how powerful lived experience is. And so for that reason, it is my honor to introduce Alex Madrid, who is a self-advocate. And he's also going to share some of his lived experience and strategies that he has used to work with regional centers. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Alex.
Thank you, Tamika, and I think thank you. So I just want to say that it's such an honor to be with you all and share my experience, a little bit about me and how I work in regional center and so a little bit about me. I'm born in the Philippines. I came to America in 1996 and I went to business school and high school in San Francisco, and lucky enough to went to use Berkeley from high school, and of course I as regional center Golden Gate in the Bay Area, been helping me and been with me throughout those years. And right now I am a housing specialist at Regional Center, Golden Gate Regional Center. Next slide. So like I said, I've been with Regional Center since I was 14. Didn't know any English. I and and of course I didn't know what my services are. I didn't know what I can get from Virginia City at the time because that was my first time being at Virginia City. Give my family didn't know anything about services and likely enough someone told us about if you have any um, services like if genetic services to school can help by that Virginia Center can help with that like learning English tutoring if you need to they can help advocate for with you at school if the school cannot understand what you need, Virginia Center can help and support, advocate with you and your family to the school. I was before being a staff at Golden Gate. I was in the board at Golden Gate, and I was a representative for ARCA. Um, so I learned so much regarding what admin does and the association and learning about what DDS can do to support the 21 region city. Next slide, like I said, the challenge is that my challenge was at the time didn't know any English. My social worker, or I guess service provider, social worker at the time kept changing. So that was a big challenge. I'm not sure about you guys. That was a challenge for me because I I had to my family had to navigate what services I have like home care at the time. I didn't have in-home support services at the time because my family didn't know how to apply for services. So that was a big challenge. The turnover of social social worker was a challenge. And at the same time, we didn't know, I didn't know at the time how to ask for help and support. So, with Asian culture, asking for help is a big taboo. So, I had to navigate on how on changing the mindset of my family, especially my parents, that look, I need the support. We have to ask for help. Actually, I see. Next slide. My thoughts on this is that just ask for ask a lot of questions for to your social workers. Again, I think I like what Vivian and Chris was saying. I said knowing what ask yourself first what you need and what you want And that's how you can ask the support that you need to your service providers or to your social worker, because and identify really what is it that you need or want, because sometimes when you if you um just go to your social worker and kind of tell them what you think someone needs, they're gonna ask a lot of questions, and sometimes if you haven't touched to it, um, you might get stuck or um or don't know how to answer that question, and it might you might get denied. So again, asking questions yourself first, what do you need and what type of services you might need, and identify what original center can offer. Next slide. I think that is my last slide, and I just want to say thank you very much for this open opportunity to speak on my experience.
Well, thank you, Alex. And, I agree with you. It is hard to ask, know what to ask for if you don't know what's offered. And it looks like you had somebody echo those comments as well in the Q&A section of the session. Definitely want to thank you for your advocacy for when you were on the board, your continued advocacy with housing navigation as a specialist with Regional Center. And I really love how you shared how you worked with your Regional Center Service Coordinator, to pivot when you had changing workers, and, what you did to advocate to get your services. So thank you again, Alex, for sharing your lived experience, why you should ask questions, and then the overall importance of being included. I think we've heard that echoed throughout this session today. So thank you. Not only thank you to you, but also thank you to all of our wonderful speakers that presented today. I'm looking at time, and I want to make sure that you guys have enough time to get into our closing remarks session, but definitely want to thank our translator as well, and just welcome you guys all to our final session for the day. So what's going to take place now is basically when we leave this session, the window's going to close. When it closes, you should be brought back to the regular lobby portion of this presentation. When you get into the lobby, you're going to click join for the next session on the session labeled closing remarks and keynote. There you can also find in that lobby area some key information on exhibitors. You can access that at the top right hand of the page, and also get some helpful resources there in the Zoom portal. Just want to remind you guys to make sure you attend that session, because there is a random drawing at the end of the event for today. Sorry, we kind of hit our mark on time, so I'm just double checking. Okay, you're welcome, Laureen, and then Lisa. Thank you for your comments and Q&A as well. It looks like most of the questions have already been answered. So with that, just want to thank you guys for spending part of your afternoon with us, and thank you for participating. And then again, thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. A lot of helpful information, a lot of foundational practices that were shared, and just a lot of opportunities to dig a little deeper with the wonderful links that were shared by Martha in the chat, so that we can just learn a little bit more. More to come in the future on the horizon, but thank you guys for your time, and just thank you for all of your advocacy. And Martha, I don't have any privileges to stop recording or anything. So it'll have to either be you or Myrna to end the session. I have nothing.
I'll go ahead and stop recording. Here we go.
Thank